They're on. Okay, the Board of Adjustment of the City of Gun Barrel City, Texas will meet in a regular meeting in City Hall Council Chambers located at 1716 West Main Street, Gun Barrel City, Texas, on Thursday, November 7th, 2024 at 2 p.m. We'll call to order. From my left.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tracy here.
Sikora here.
Mullins here.
Coleman here.
It takes 4 affirmative votes in order for a variance to be granted. If a variance is denied, the only course of action is to the registrar file an appeal with the Henderson County District Court. New business, 4A, consider or take action to approve the August 1, 2024 meeting minutes.
I move that we consider and take action to approve the August 1st, 2024 meeting minutes.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, vote for my left.
I approve.
Sikora, yes.
Mullins, yes.
Coleman, yes.
4B, we'll turn that over to Dr. Smith.
This is one where Marty can't recognize himself, right? So here we are today. This is Mr. Mullins' final meeting with us. Marty has termed out, and we have new members that have been appointed, and Judge Wallace will come up and swear those in. But Marty, personally from the staff and from, I know your peers on that board, thank you. I can't say thank you enough. When I came here a year ago, BOA was something I had only worked at a distance, not near as close as I do now, and you really helped me when I came. And I know you've helped your peers, and I know you've helped the residents of Gun Barrel, and you've been serving Gun Barrel for a long time, and now you're going to take a break. So you did P&Z, right? There was some P&Z there along with your BOA, and you have termed out on BOA, and maybe we can convince you to sit out a year and come back. We'll be knocking on your door. But thank you for not only agreeing and volunteering and giving your time, but then accepting the chair role, which, as everyone should know, takes on a whole other level of responsibility of helping us make sure we get the agendas and showing up extra to go through everything so that they have all the answers. And I can tell you, Marty's driven by a lot of cases and had to lead a lot of people down this path. So from the staff and from your peers on the board and from City Council, thank you very much for the time you served and gave Gun Barrel. We really all appreciate it.
Thank you. Now, just for everybody's edification, Mr. Sikora is the vice chair, and so he is going to take over until we get new people seated and new appointees done.
All right, so we're moving on to item 4C, and that would be the Associate Judge Grace Wallace administering the oaths of office and to seat newly appointed board members. Boy, it's harder than it looks, Marty. It's got big words.
I need to go up as well, right?
Ah.
For the video, it doesn't. All right. So if you'll each raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear or affirm that I have not directly or indirectly paid, offered, promised to pay, contributed, or promised to contribute any money or thing of value, or promised any public office or employment for the giving or withholding of a vote at the election at which I was elected, or as a reward to secure my appointment or confirmation, whichever the case may be, so help me God. All right, raise your right hand again. I state your names. Do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the duties of the Office of Board of Adjustment of the State of Texas, and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God. All right, congratulations.
All right, welcome new board members, and I believe you can have a seat up here on the dais.
Yeah. We'll need you up here.
All right, welcome you guys, and thank you for your service and for volunteering. With that, I think we are ready to move on to item 4D, to conduct the Board of Adjustment orientation.
Okay, good afternoon. So I'm going to do a short, kind of short presentation. Let me grab this clicker from Janet. So Gun Barrel City is taking a little different approach this year. Some of you serve on multiple boards. You will have seen me do this a time or two. But I kind of tried to customize the orientation for each board and kind of do that before you appoint your officers, so that now that you've all committed and we've gotten you sworn in and we have you in a seat, you know kind of what you're going to have to do now, right? So this is the Board of Adjustment member orientation. No working. So the overview, the Board of Adjustment, or you will hear it called a lot the BOA, is a quasi-judicial body established by Chapter 211 of the Texas Local Government Code that is authorized in certain cases to appropriate conditions or safeguards and make special exceptions to the terms of our city's zoning ordinances. This is specifically set aside by Texas Local Government Code, not necessarily, it is included in our ordinances as well, but it is outlined by Texas Local Government Code. And this is the one board in Gun Barrel that is very different than every other board. This board makes decisions. Your decisions, if they don't like them, do not go to city council. We'll talk about that today. If they don't like your decisions, they actually go to the district court. And so the decisions that this board makes carries a different weight than every other board that we have. As provided by Chapter 211, the ZBA, Zoning Board of Adjustment, sometimes it's called, or the BOA, Board of Adjustments, has to hear and decide an appeal, hear and decide a special exception. They can authorize in special cases a variance, and they can hear and decide other matters as directed by council or by our ordinance. We'll see if this works. Oh, there we go. So this is specifically called out in Charter Section 905. It establishes a Board of Adjustments, which must have 5 members and 2 alternates. We currently have 5 members and 1 alternate. Charles is serving as in our alternate position. Charles will only be called on to vote in the case we are missing a member. You heard Marty mention early in the meeting, we have to have 4 members in order to hear a case and to vote on a case. It's 75% of our board. You'll see that in my slideshow over and over and over. We set meetings only as needed, so it's super important when Janet emails and says, hey, can you be here, that you let us know, because if we get here and we only have 3 members, we then have to table that item to a future meeting. So it's 5 members. There's 2 alternates. We currently have 1 alternate, which is great because this is the first time since I've been here that we have had an alternate. And you hear zoning cases and appointments and removals to the members of the BOA are in accordance with state law and our charter. The board meets at the call of the presiding officer and at other times that may be necessary. So we have an application process where we take in variance requests. Brittany Lewis in the back in the blue is our city planner. They would submit that to our permitting office. Brittany would get that. She would put all the information together for the case, and then she or Janet, our city secretary, would reach out to the board and say, we have a case or we have 3 cases, can we meet? So we don't meet more than once a month, but we may not necessarily meet 12 times a year if we don't have any cases to come before you. The authority of the BOA is called out in section 156 of our Code of Ordinances. The board may hear and decide an appeal that alleges error in an order, requirement, decision, or determination made by an administrative official. So if somebody doesn't like a decision of our building official, they can appeal that to the BOA. They can appeal that to the Board of Adjustment. They can hear and decide special exceptions to the terms of the zoning ordinance. They can authorize in specific cases a variance from the terms of a zoning ordinance. So our zoning ordinances are all under our land usage, and you'll want to make yourself familiar with that. I have that here. The most important part is the concurring vote of 75% of the members of the board is necessary. So there are 5 members of the board. 75% is 4 members. We have to have 4 members anytime we have a case in front of you to vote on. The powers and duties of the BOA, this is section 156.138 of our Code of Ordinances. It specifically outlines what the BOA can do and what the BOA must consider during each of the cases before them. So you do have the power to hear and decide appeals when there is an alleged error or they need a waiver of some kind. And we see a lot of sheds, right? So I want to build a shed on my property, but the shed's too big, or the shed's too close to the house, or I want to put in a driveway that doesn't meet the standards. Those would be the kinds of cases that this board typically hears. We hear a lot of, I want to put in a storage shed, and there are a lot of rules about how big the storage shed can be and how far away from the house the storage shed could be. Council determines what those ordinances are. This board can waive them if there is a specific hardship, and that is very specific language in Texas Local Government Code about the hardship, which we'll talk about. So these are some of the things you can do. You can permit the erection and use of buildings. You can permit a public utility or public service use or structure. You can permit a transitional use between a business and industrial and residential district. So there are a lot of very detailed codes. This is it, 156.138. All of our codes are available online through MuniCode, so I would keep those at your fingertips. Bookmark them on your bar. Every case you get, in this particular case, you're going to want to do that research to make sure you're looking at what are they asking for a variance against and what is the special hardship for that. And then, again, to grant a permit for extension of a use, height, or area regulation, to waive or reduce parking and loading requirements, you could have somebody come in. We have Pier 334, when they got theirs, they did theirs as part of their development, rezoning to planned development, but you could have a business that comes in and says, hey, I'm going to build this business, and it says I have to have 14 parking spots. That request to only have 10 or 9 would come to BOA, and BOA would then research that case and make that decision on how many parking spots does this business need based on what their traffic's going to be and what their hardship might be. So these are some of the other ones. Permit land within 300 feet of a multifamily dwelling to be improved for the parking spaces required. Determine cases in uncertainty of classification. It is somebody, you have to think about it like somebody, we have an ordinance that says you have to do X, and somebody is requesting to get a waiver not to do X, right? I want to build a shed, but I want to build a shed attached to my house instead of 10 foot away from my house. And you are the board that they come to, and ask to do that, and you do the research and go to the neighborhood and check it out, so. And no worky. And then section 156, 140, these are the specific things that the provisions, I guess, that the board must consider. A permit variance and a yard requirement of any district. Whenever a property owner can show, Brooke, you can't shut the door. Brooke, cannot shut the door. This open meeting, we're going to talk about that, but that's why Brooke can't shut the door, right? Because it could discourage a resident or a citizen from coming in and attending our meeting because they came in the door was shut. So we have to leave the door open. Whenever a property owner can show that a strict application of the terms of this chapter relating to the use, construction, alteration. So these are all in your code of ordinances and outline specifically what this board considers. Oop. We both are clicking. Now, these are necessary hardships. State law updates these. These are the specific hardships that this board can today consider. The cost of compliance with the zoning ordinance. So if I want to build a shed, but it's going to cost me an excessive amount to do it to follow our ordinances, that could be considered a hardship. That compliance would result in a loss to the lot on which the structure is located of at least 25% of the area. Compliance would result in the structure not be in compliance with a completely different city ordinance. Compliance would result in the unreasonable encroachment on the adjacent property, or the city considers the structure to be a non-conforming structure. This is a lot of information. What I promise to each of you is that anytime a case comes before you, staff will always give a presentation outlining all the bits and pieces of the case. You will get that with your agenda before the meeting, so you typically will have that the Wednesday about 7 days prior to the meeting. And then staff will also review that and be available to answer questions. There must be a necessary hardship in order for us to grant a variance. So it is on the property owner to prove that they meet a hardship before we can even consider whether or not they come before BOA.
I'm sorry. So for those of you that are new, something came up and I wanted to ask you, what's the proper way, or is it possible to create something to allow this? So in a prior meeting, we had a gentleman who built a new house, built a garage type of structure behind the house, all within ordinances, codes, and he wanted to put a carport onto the structure, onto the parking structure, right? So he could get a carport approved, he could get the garage was already built, the house was built, but because of the way our ordinances were written, my understanding is he was not allowed to connect the carport to the garage. So instead, he had to have distance between the carport and the garage. Now, beautiful piece of property, built a beautiful house, beautiful out structure. It would look better from a look perspective to have it attached. And we were unable to approve that because he didn't meet a hardship requirement. So my understanding, and I'm asking because the master is here, so is there an ordinance, a code, something the city can adopt to allow the Board of Adjustments when it's in the city's best interest, when it's in the residents' best interest, to allow something like that to happen?
There is not. These are very set by state law, and there is a reason for that. So in this particular case, the house was 1,000 square foot. The shed he already had was 450 square foot. If he had attached additional shed footage, he would have made his shed too big by code. But what you have to consider is how does it impact and set a standard for the properties around it as well, right? So that's part of the conversation. So because the efforts of this board are governed by state law, the city wouldn't, they pass their ordinances in a way that try to keep land ownership, Marty, correct me if I'm wrong, they pass their ordinances, every city does, in a way that tries to keep land ownership equal for everybody. So that what I can do, Charles can do, Tiffany can do, Scott can do, Jim can do, everybody has those same rules. Sometimes there will be a hardship, right? For whatever reason, and it varies, it would be very hard for me to give you an example on how this gentleman could prove a hardship, because he literally could go out 5 foot and build 2 sheds. He had plenty of room to do that, but he could not attach it because of our ordinance. But because of the way state laws are written, council cannot pass an ordinance that gives you more freedom. Your freedom to make decisions and determine hardships are set by the state law, not by city council.
So the only way to address that particular case would have been for you to change the ordinances to allow it.
To change the ordinance that allows how many square footage, yes.
Well, and I wanted to bring up this example because it was an education for me, and thank you, Marty, that what we can approve is very limited. And the second is, and I don't know how this happens, but really that case, the gentleman should never have come in front of us because there was no way we could approve it. So I mean, maybe you can't deny him to do it, but I think if someone would have advised him.
We did, absolutely.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, absolutely. Please understand that by the time it gets to you, my staff has had multiple conversations with these folks saying, you have to prove a hardship. You wanting it isn't a hardship.
Maybe he didn't understand
So,
what hardship
and
was.
and I mean, I was a part of that conversation. I 100% know. He's absolutely, an applicant could stand here and say all day long, I didn't get told that. But in both of those cases that were in front of this board, both applicants were fully explained, do you understand this is your alternate? We cannot tell them they can't come here. They absolutely can come and plead their case and hope that you find some hardship staff didn't find. We can't say no. They have the right to do that by Texas state law. But we do have that conversation with every single applicant before they come to you.
Right, so I'm setting this up for the new members so they can understand that the guidelines are very strict.
They are.
As far as what we can give a hardship for, so.
100%.
I got an education from Marty on this, because I would have thought, hey, it's good for the city, it's good for the citizen, but.
Yeah, and
So it's
that's the big
important to
question.
understand the limitations of what.
Yeah, I think that's the really big question is, it isn't for this board to decide what's good for the city. What's good for the city is determined by council, and those are set in ordinances, right? Council made those ordinances for specific reasons because that's what was best for the entire city. A lot of times what comes before BOA is specific cases that don't want to do that, right? They want their shed to be bigger. They want to be closer to their property line. They want to have a carport where the rules say they can't put a carport. They get to come before this board and they get to plead their case and explain why it is a hardship. But staff does a lot of work before they ever get to you, and staff will actually bring you a recommendation which says this is a hardship or this is not, and they will have shared that with every applicant that comes before you. We meet with every single applicant and help them understand. Frequently, they will still make the decision that they want to plead to the people that sit here. But at the same time, staff will have had that conversation with them and will make a recommendation to you about this is a hardship or this isn't. I don't want to carry my groceries in the rain isn't really a hardship, right? If they have, and a lot of times what you'll see in communities is I build a house and I build this shed and I build this shed and I build this shed. Well, now suddenly I need something else, but I'm out of space. I'm out of space on my land. I've covered too much of my land. I'm out of square footage availability. But I don't understand why I still can't. It's my property. Why can't I do that? Well, that's why we have ordinances in place, building codes in place to keep things safe and to keep things uniformly looking all the same, right? And that's why you have zoning districts, and that's why you have building codes to attempt to keep things so that me building 42 little bitty sheds on my property doesn't make Charles's property worth less money because now they're living next to somebody that has a bunch of tiny homes, right? And that's where this board comes into helping determine, is there an unnecessary hardship on this specific property that allows us to grant a variance?
So when staff applies those guidelines, right? right? So they look at the Texas guidelines, they know what our local codes and ordinances are, and they recommend denied, for instance. So if my understanding is correct, they've looked at the Texas laws, they've looked at our code and ordinance. If they say it's denied, we really can't say it's approved.
If you find some hardship that staff missed through your
Yeah, I mean, it's
conversation,
more of a check, I guess, is my.
100%.
We haven't
rather
said
than-
no to everybody. You know, it's
No, I'm
been,
just trying.
Hold
to
on,
understand.
hold on.
So when we get a recommendation from the city, and they've looked at the rules of Texas, and they know what the local ordinances are, and they say, no, you should not approve this, then
it is not this board. You're not appointed to rubber stamp every staff decision, right? It would be like council rubber stamping everything. I'm like, hey, this is a great idea. We should do this. And council says, well, Angie said yes, so we should say yes. This is a case where each of you are going to be given, as 5 individuals and an alternate, the opportunity to do your own research, to look at your own state laws, to look at your ordinances, to look at the property, and then make a determination or ask questions that might help that resident better explain their hardship. So we're going to do our best shot at it, but sometimes there could be, I mean, I have seen BOAs overturn staff recommendations. That's absolutely. I mean, I have also seen a staff recommend that be allowed and the BOA say no because it will detrimentally impact the properties around it. So I have seen it go both ways, all 3 ways. Yes, sir.
Where the city council has ordinance they put in place, those ordinances are based on state law.
Yep.
They cannot.
Some cases.
State law. What they can change is in the ordinance where it says that your accessory building can only be 50%, can't be more than 50% of the main structure, they can change that number.
Yeah.
And then if they had that, then that guy would have been able to have his carports on.
Yeah.
Because he still would have been under the maximum number that we require.
But
And we are talking about
Yeah.
variances.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing, it's a variance.
yeah.
It's not a special exception, it's a
Nope.
variance.
It is, and it's based on that one. This microphone just got really loud. Yeah, it is based on that, but it is important as a decision-making board that every time a case comes before you, you do research and you ask questions because you may figure something out that staff didn't figure out. You may have a different approach that staff didn't have. Staff is going to make a recommendation. We ask a set of questions. Brittany is in the process of redoing our application that forces people to do a little better job of, I want it versus I have to have it for this reason. And so our application will look a little different going forward. But that is our hope. But this board ultimately gets to make that final decision. And I would not say just take what staff says and roll with it because we can miss things from time to time. So the onus is on each of the 5 people that sit on this board to really do your own research, ask questions. Brittany and I and Brooke and Janet are all very available. I'm sure Marty would let you call him if you don't know and say, hey, talk me through this on your first couple of cases. But I am always happy to sit down and go through the case with you and look at the state laws and look at what research you've done and help you reason why that might or might not be a hardship. But the state does specifically outline what can be a hardship and what cannot. Staff cannot waive a variance. So even if they come to us and it's all yeses, we can't say go. They still have to come to the BOA. If they come to us and they check 0 of those boxes, staff cannot say no. The BOA has to make that decision by state law. Does that help? All right. So things, special training, get yourself familiar with the Public Information Act. As a volunteer that is appointed to a board, you have a responsibility to pay attention to the Texas Public Information Act, which is Chapter 552 of the Texas Government Code. Open Meetings Act, you heard me ask Brooke to leave the door open. There are very specific rules about Texas open meetings and closed meetings, and we could have to have an executive session in some case, but for the most part, we meet in this room, we keep the door open, we invite the public at any time. Sometimes our public is very passionate about whatever the case is in front of the board, and that's when we lean on the chair to help us maintain control. So Robert's Rules of Order, all of Gun Barrel City boards and commission follow Robert Rules of Order. That is the order under which we run the meeting. There are a million YouTube videos. You can go out and watch some cliff notes of that, but that is what we use and what we ask our chair or vice chair to follow. For this board, a quorum of members is four members. Always keep in mind a walking quorum. If you have questions or you need help, always contact Brittany or I. Does this mean 4 members can't be at the same restaurant all having dinner together? Absolutely not. Don't talk about city business. Don't talk about cases. Don't start emailing each other. Sue can email Linda, who then can't email Jim, who then can't email Scott, and all talk about the same case. Now you are having a meeting because 4 people are engaged in that conversation. My best advice to you is if you need help or if you have questions, give me a shout. That is probably our cat who is outside the door screaming because she's mad we're in here. So just keep in mind, 1, walking quorum on email, never hit reply all. If there are meetings that need to be set up, our staff will do that. We typically will blind carbon copy you. If you get an email from me, it will look like it just went to me. It's because I blind carbon copy the whole board. If one of us does inadvertently send an email with everybody's name, never hit reply all. The minute you hit reply all, we have had a meeting, right, about whatever that topic is. Board appointments and meetings. Again, this board meets when we have an applicant request for a variance. 5 members and 2 alternates. We currently have 5 members and 1 alternate. If a member is absent, Charles will be called on. Thank you, Judge Wallace. Charles will be called on to be a part of that case and vote on that case. If we have 5 members, if all 5 members are here, Charles will not be called on. Charles can still input information about the case if he has questions or if he has feedback. I have no problem with that. I think it's just an extra voice and an extra set of eyes looking at each case. But the chair can recognize Charles as an alternate to give feedback, but Charles does not vote until such time we are missing a member. And that helps sometimes if we end up with a meeting in the middle of a time when 2 or 3 people are gone, having an alternate really helps do that. Members serve at the grace of council, and so you may be removed by city council at any time. And they would have written charges in a public hearing. And again, any case has to be heard by 75% of the members. Anytime we have a meeting, there have to be 4 members here. Ethics policy, Gun Barrel City Council approved an ethics policy. It's Resolution 2023-002. These are just some of the highlights. Be dedicated to the concepts of effective and democratic local government. Serve the best interests of the people at all times, even if that may conflict with what is best for your personal interest. Endeavor to make policy decisions based on factual information. Avoid participating in any manners that create the appearance of a conflict of interest or unethical conduct. Refrain from activities which may undermine the public's confidence in you as one of their representatives. Don't leverage your position for personal gain or benefits. Keep matters of a confidential nature confidential. And these are just a few of them. There are about 14 items in this policy. There is a copy in your folder. Yes? No? We will send you a copy along with, Janet will send you a copy of that resolution along with this presentation. Brittany did put together a folder of information for new board members. I think everybody got a copy. It is just some information from Texas Municipal League, a little bit about being on a BOA and some of the rules that are recommended and such. How BOA works, as I mentioned, BOA is a little different than every other board. Staff is the liaison to BOA, and then BOA, if you want to appeal what BOA says, you go to district court. So when they leave here, if you say yes or no and they don't agree, they then take that case to district court, and district court then rules on. Nobody in here is going to be held like, yo, you shouldn't have said that, right? That's not what district court does. It's just district court acts like the next level of the BOA. So if they don't like our decision, they have the right to appeal that to the district court. The district court will then hear that case and determine if there is a hardship or not. So, City Council, this is part of our council. We don't have a picture of Mr. Burson. Brian Kroll, April April Burns, Rita Evans, Jennifer Jacobs, Jay Burson, and Kenneth Foster. And then Board of Adjustment leadership, one thing you will do today is you will appoint a chair and a vice chair. Marty has served as the chair for the last 4 years, several years, 6 years probably. Mr. Sikora has served as the vice chair. Mr. Sikora will lead us through that point until which we approve a chair, and then the chair will take over the leadership of the meeting. This is a one-year appointment, so new chair and vice chair are appointed each October or November, because this is just when your next meeting was. The planning and the building staff, so Brittany Lewis is a city planner. 90% of your communications will go through Brittany, and I will just ask that you please copy me. It helps me make sure that I'm in the loop of what's going on, and Brittany is a relatively new in our planner position, and sometimes we have planning meetings, and so we can all sit down and talk about it. Lauren Henson is behind the front desk. She's our permit tech. A lot of our builders and developers and residents, that's the first face they see when they do business with the city. Shannon Wiggins is our building official, and then, of course, I'm Angie. What's your role on the board? So volunteer leaders make recommendations to council. In y'all's case, you are making decisions based on variances, based on ordinances council passes. So council passes the ordinances that they believe are best for Gun Barrel, and then you hear the variance requests to those. City council members are responsible for the direction of the organization, and staff are responsible for the administration of the organization. So council governs, and myself and staff go out and manage. Advice, ask questions is the best advice I can give you. I am happy to spend time with you. Brittany, Brooke, Janet, everybody has dealt with this board just a little bit. We are happy to sit down. If you get a case in front of you don't understand, you can go by the place. You can take pictures of the place. You can look at those state laws. You can look at our ordinances. You can take all that into consideration. I'm happy to sit down and play devil's advocate with you, right? Well, if you did this, what is the consequence of that for the neighbor? I think that's what you always want to think about is the decision you make, what is the bearing on the people that directly live around or in that neighborhood, and what would happen if everybody did that, right? So I'm happy to sit down with anybody and have that conversation. You can have that conversation with a couple of other people on your team, but you don't want to build consensus. So Sue doesn't want to sit down with Linda and hear Linda's opinion, and then sit down with Jim and hear Jim's opinion, and then sit down with Scott and hear Scott's opinion, because then if Jim and Scott talk about Sue's opinion, you've had a meeting, right? So that's where you got to be real, real careful. Being an engaged leader, we will ask that you read your email and respond to requests. Janet will send out requests and say, hey, we have a couple cases. This is when we need to have a meeting. Our meetings typically last about an hour or less. So, but you always want to plan on a couple of hours and make sure that you'll be here. Review your meeting materials in advance and ask questions. You're welcome to go by and see the property. Typically, we will submit pictures so you don't have to take them. Our team goes out and actually will take pictures from a couple of different angles. We would ask that you keep that information confidential, because sometimes that has to do with a person's private property. Participate, attend board meetings. Sometimes we'll participate in events and activities like the Christmas parade or something. Encourage your circle of influence to provide you ideas and information. So, you know, if you have a case come before you and you have questions, you are absolutely, you know, hey, if this was in your neighborhood, what would you think about it? Don't give away personal information, but it's okay to get feedback from other people. Review action items in your minutes and initiate action. So if there's something in there and we miss it, don't be afraid to call me and say, Angie, we got to do this. You got to call us. And so you got to have a meeting, and we're happy to do that. You're not going to hurt anybody's feelings around here. Meet and respect deadlines. And then good governance. So things that really affect this board: Texas Local Government Code Chapter 211, Gun Barrel City Comprehensive Plan, available on our website along with all of our maps. So there is the comp plan, and the appendix is right available on our website, super easy, gunbarrelcity.gov. Charter, Section 9, Code of Ordinances regarding land usage. It's about Title 9-ish. If you go down, it's about Chapter 156. And then you have an orientation folder. It's just some information that the Texas Municipal League puts out. Every city has a BOA. They're required by state law. Their makeup is required by state law. And they are some of the most interesting but the hardest boards to be on because you're making decisions for your community, right? And you're making variance decisions for your community. So once you make that, if I'm your neighbor, I may call and ask for that same thing, right? So while can be a challenge, it also can be very interesting because you will see a lot of interesting cases in your time. Any questions?
I have a couple of questions. One's really just a clarification. So we get our board packet out and we have questions. How do we ask the question? Because you shouldn't reply all with a question, correct?
Send it to Brittany or I.
Okay.
Or send it to Brittany, copy
Okay.
me, and we will make sure, if it is something, and this is a thing, this is an excellent question, Jim. If it is a question and we're like, oh, everybody should know this, we missed it, we are going to send it out to everybody.
Right.
We will respond and say, hey, Jim had a great question. Here's the answer to that question, so everybody has that same information.
Just want to make it real clear because you start getting into some difficulties about a walking meeting if you just reply all. So I would just say never reply.
The best thing, if I send you an email, the 2 box will be blank because I always blind carbon copy everybody. I blind carbon copy council, I blind carbon copy P&Z. Not everybody has the same practice, so the best thing you can do is never hit the reply all button, hit the forward, send it to Brittany and I, and we will make sure everybody gets that same information.
My second question was really, what's the relationship between what we do and what P&Z does? Is there, what's the, like, we clearly have different things going on, but have people already been through P&Z for the most part when they come to us, or what's?
Not necessarily. So not every case gets heard by P&Z. So think about P&Z is really new builds, new projects, special use permits, platting. So that would be a brand new project. I want to plat a new neighborhood. I want to open a new business. Rezoning, I want to rezone my property. Those are the kind of things that go before planning and zoning. Things that are going to come to you tend to be things that are already in place and they want to add to it, and it doesn't fit the ordinances we have in place.
Right.
That's why storage sheds and garages and that kind of thing are a lot of what we see. Maybe zoning requires, you could see this one. This is one that could come up. I want to remodel my house, and I have a garage in the back, and zoning requires me to have a garage, but I don't want to do that garage anymore. I don't want to have a garage. So that could be a case that comes before a board like this, right? Will you waive that I have to have a board? And here's the reason that it's a hardship for me, and there could be 100 of them, but that would be something. So typically, they don't overlap at all. You could have a new project that isn't requiring a special use permit or special zoning or special anything, and they go to P&Z, but then they decide they need 5 less parking spaces. That might come to BOA. So that would be the only time there was, and I'm stretching, I'm reaching.
Okay.
I can't think of any time in the last few years in my career where it's gone to P&Z and then immediately come to BOA.
Right.
That would be a case where where they get something approved and then they want less parking spaces or something, some variance.
I think the biggest challenge that we face from a public perception standpoint as a board is I think that in the past, I think this board was a lot looser with how they permitted things, how they allowed things to go through. And I think the word on the street is that, it's a pretty easy path to get an exception. So really talking about the 8 things, the 8 hardships is a relatively new, it kind of started, I guess, when I've been on the board, I don't know, 2-3 years now, I don't know how long, but it kind of started when I started, but it didn't really get popularized until recently, where, oh, okay, we really have these 8 guidelines. And so I think that from public perception, that's the biggest challenge, is people think that they're just going to come in and say, hey, I need this, and I really, really, like Angie said, I really want this, and that's not any of our hardships that we can grant. So I'm glad that you guys are changing the form, because I think some people just flat out aren't aware of that. They just think,
It's-
well, I'll go and I'll tell them. Another thing that we face a lot is people are halfway through building something that they now want permitted that they got caught halfway through building. And, you know, we have to take that case by case. Don't know if that's really a hardship or not, just the fact that they tried to build something and spent some money
It
and,
is not.
yeah, it doesn't seem like a hardship. It just seems
We,
like.
we recently had a case where we had somebody come in and put in a concrete pad. And we told them, hey, you are too close to your house, your pad's too big. But when they put the concrete pad in, that's not what it said on the form. It said on the form, I'm building a pickleball court. It's not
Right.
what it said, but this particular, it could happen, right? I'm gonna put a pickleball court in my backyard. So they pour the concrete pad, and then they come back 6 months later and are like, oh, I already have this pad, I'm gonna stick a shed on it.
Right.
But the shed's too big. So that's not a hardship. A hardship isn't you did this and now you have to use what you have. We have been able to work with that gentleman to get him to a happy place. But it took this board denying that claim in order for us to get him to work with us to find an answer. And I believe he is now, just so the board knows, he's completely taken care of. But it took this board denying his variance in order for him to be willing to sit down and have a conversation about what his options were. And sometimes we see that. We see a lot, you can't tell me that, I'm going to BOA. All right, like, it's painful, but
Yeah, sure.
I think that's a good example that you're mentioning there, right? So when the city was able to work with the person to come up with a resolution, did it still fit within the guidelines of the ordinances and stuff? Or
Yep.
were you able to, okay, so they have to play within that box. It's like, hey, here's some
100%.
ideas.
We
what
cannot
can
give
do
a
that will Allow
variance.
it to fit
Yep.
in.
we cannot give a variance. So we cannot say we're going to bend this rule a little here and bend that rule a little there. That's what this board does, right? They're the ones that get to say, okay, we will grant you this to do that. But sometimes it takes a BOA saying no in order for us to get a resident to work with us to find a solution that's amenable for everybody. And we were able to do that in that case. One just said, I don't want two different sheds, whatever. But one, we were able to help him by replatting and getting things like where they're supposed to be and buying a little extra property here to be able to get him to a place. And we offer that up from the get-go, but they absolutely have the right to say, no, I want a variance and I'm going to ask for it. And that's okay. That's the American right, I guess, right? So, all right. I'm going to turn it over to y'all.
Did everybody get their questions answered more than thoroughly? Okay.
My door's open. Come by anytime.
All right, with that, we're going to move on to item 4E, consider and take action to elect a chairperson. So I guess at this point, we would entertain nominations.
Oh, I nominate you.
Wow. I will say that, you know, it won't hurt my feelings if somebody says that they would rather do that than I would, but I would definitely do it. This board, one thing that's hard about this board, it's hard to get experience on it because we don't meet every month. You know, sometimes we meet
Right.
6 times a year. And,
That's just what
you
you
know,
said.
yeah, and so it is hard to get experience. And it does take, every time we have a meeting, I usually have to go and study just a little bit to remember like what's what and all that. So
Freshen up.
I would accept the nomination, but I certainly, if you're not going to hurt my feelings, if somebody has a real passion for it. Okay.
We got 3 there. 3. What about you? You vote, no, gentleman.
Well, we'll take a,
Yeah, I think he has to do
I'll take a vote on it, and I'll vote for my left. Just say your name and yes or no.
Tracy, yes.
Coleman, yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right, it sounds like it's unanimous, so, all right. Moving on, we are going to item 4F, and consider and take action to elect a vice chairperson. I know Linda is interested in that as well. She mentioned that to me, and she is probably, I think we have the same number of time on the board. So, but again, we want to entertain all.
I'd like to make a motion for Linda.
Okay.
Vice Chair.
Do I have a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. I'll take a vote from my left. Alexander, yes. Sikora, yes.
Holman, yes.
All right, with that, I would take a motion for adjournment. Anybody? And I don't think we need, I don't think we need a second on that, so we are good to go home. Thank you.
We're done.
Awesome.
And I'm Linda.
Congratulations, Mr.